You that don't know me, I'm Jane. I work at Wild Goose Publications, the very proud publisher of Joe's book. And we're here, that's what we're here tonight to talk about Joe's book, about the stories in it, and to hear Joe talk about why she wrote it, how she came to write it, to read stories from it. But what I wanted to start with is the introduction in the book, which comes from a thing that's used by Spilling the Beans, which some of you will know about and you will hear about more. But it's a beautiful passage about what stories mean. So I'm just going to read that first so we all kind of get ourselves into storytelling mode. So it goes like this. Story's the lifeblood of faith. In story, we can tell the truth and speak with honesty about things for which there are not yet words. Story contains mystery and is the poetry that forms faith. Stories grow as we grow and can reveal new truths at different times in our lives. Giving stories to people is one of the most important things we can do in sharing our faith. Children and adults hold stories in their being and keep coming back to them throughout life. Our culture is stored in story, and the same is true for our faith. And that, to me, sums up so much about what we do at Wild Goose Publications, because what we try to do are bring stories out into the world. And the best thing that you can get when you bring a book out is that it inspires somebody or it opens their minds to something new. And I can say, hand on heart, this book will do both of these things for you. And it's written by Joe. So let's meet Joe. I don't know if all of you know Joe, but I imagine most of you do. But if you don't, Joe is the author of The Jar and the Jug. She writes for Spill the Beans. She's a long-term member of the Wild Goose Resource Group. Although I did find out earlier that there's many other feathers to her cap that perhaps you don't know about her and we might reveal. But Joe, first of all, just if you want to give a little introduction to yourself, to say you're the writer, the resource group worker, a little bit about what you've been doing these last many years with us.
Okay, if I can sum up 15 years of my life, Jane.
There you go.
What an opening question. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be with you. Well, yes, I've been part of the Wild Goose Resource Group since 2009. Before that, I was working with the Church of Scotland in parish team ministry. So I'm a deacon in the Church of Scotland. I'm still a deacon in the Church of Scotland. I've got another deacon here tonight as well. Dot, lovely to see you. So since I've been part of the resource group, I mean, it's been a fantastic way just to share a passion that I already had about developing worship and what do we mean by more creative forms of worship? What happens if our forms of worship can be more participative, can bring in a more embodied forms, more about art? I mean, in the widest form of the arts. And I think a big part of that is good storytelling and to really bring the Bible alive. So it's been an absolute joy that one of the strands of my multifaceted job in the last several years has been being a contributor for the Spill the Beans worship and learning resources, and it's that has prompted all of the pieces that are in this book. So is that enough of a starter?
That's a good starter, right? So the book, how did the book come about? You always planned to bring this out as a book, or Sandra and Neil said, "Come on, Joe, we need a book out of this." What was the point that it went from being just resources that went out as part of Spill the Beans and into a book?
It was absolutely all Neil Painter, because absolutely Neil, because he had come across one or two of my pieces, which Ruth Burgess, who's also here tonight, which Ruth had used in some of her anthologies of liturgical resources. She had trawled through the great treasure trove of Spill the Beans pieces and pulled out a handful of mine. And so these had been clocked by Neil. And very nicely, a great vote of confidence from Neil. He just got in touch and said, Joe, I like your style. Have you got any more of this stuff? And I was like, well, I've got about 15 years worth of it, or however many years worth of it was when he asked. Not as many as that. And he said, send me a bunch. So I sent him a bunch. And he said, Joe, we need to do a collection of your own stuff. And the more he went through the bunch, the quite big bunch of what I'd sent, he said, but I think we could maybe get 2 books out of this. So this is the first part of the Old Testament stories. So absolutely all down to Neil that it ever became collected in one place as this book. So thanks to him.
Oh. Shout out to Neil, who couldn't be with us tonight because he's actually taken a very rare amount of time off work. But yeah, that man knows a good story when he sees one, and a good writer when he sees one. And that's the thing, you've always been a writer, right? All your life, you've been a writer. Even though you've been a deacon and a resource group worker, at heart, I think you're really a writer. Yeah?
Well, I journal a lot, and I just love word craft in all its forms, with doodling around with things, and yeah, more sort of pieces to be resources for other people like this. But yeah, I do a lot of writing of my own and just like it.
And,
I like the
and
words on the page.
do you have a favourite form? Like, I mean, do you prefer poetry, or you're happiest when you're writing a story, or you like to put a full liturgy together? Like, do you have, or that would be like trying to choose a favourite pet or child? You can't.
Yeah, I mean, they're different kinds of wonderful to me. Each is a different challenge, a different joy, and a different sort of edge to the same passion, if you like. So all of the above. Yeah.
Okay, so what's been, give me a highlight from your writing life. What's the thing that you wrote one day and you thought, nailed it? Or you thought, oh no, what have I done? I've sent that out, but then it came back as like a good thing.
Well, I don't know. There are probably many highlights if you give me long enough to think, but one off the top of my head is actually from my school days, and I'm going to actually name drop a wee bit here, Jane. But in my
Like
last
that.
year, in my last year of secondary school, Scottish CND had a poetry competition that went out across, I don't know how many schools, I don't know if it was the whole of Scotland, but it was a poetry for peace competition. And I wrote a poem and sent it in, just thought, why not? Something inspired me and I wrote this poem. Well, would you believe it? I won this competition.
You would.
And I remember going to tell one of the English teachers at school, who was a great poet, is a great poet in his own right, and had taken an interest in my bits of poetry at that stage. He wasn't my English teacher, but he was there on the staff. And so I went to tell him, I thought he'd be chuffed to hear this good news. I've won this poetry competition. And he happened to say to me, I'd also been invited by that time to a wee sort of prize giving, ceremony for it, to get a prize. And he said, if by any chance you are offered the chance for, a real poet to read your piece instead of you reading it yourself, then do take that chance, he said, because it'll be quite something for you just to feel what it's like to hear your poem in the voice of someone else who's already a kind of big name or whatever. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting piece of advice. So turned out then that there was me going along to this wee prize giving, which was actually held through here in Glasgow. I lived in Fife at the time, but through here in Glasgow in the Kelvin Hall. And I sat in the Kelvin Hall and I listened to my Poetry for Peace winner being read by none other than Liz Lochhead.
Wow. I think that deserves a round of applause, actually, because that is a life-changing thing, I would imagine, for a teenager to hear,
well,
like,
I
Scotland's national
I can remember sitting there and I can remember watching her and I can remember listening to her, kind of her word, my words in her mouth, and it was quite something. So there you go.
Okay, well, I think you're going to have to find that poem and send it to us. I think we might have to find it. We might have to find a place to put that, because, anyway, I'm moving on from that. So there is going to be a follow-up to this book. You said it's going to be 2 books.
There is, yes, all the materials already with Neil. So I know you're a real busy team there in the pubs department. So as and when he gets down to it, alongside all your other projects, the second one will be all New Testament retellings, and it's going to be called The Soldier and the Cloak.
Like that. Okay, so is there anybody here in the room that doesn't know who the Wild Goose Resource Group are, or how many people actually, hands up, who's already got the book? And if you haven't, there will be a link in the chat, which Iona will put in, for where you can either get the download version or the print version. But if you haven't got the book yet, or even if you have, tonight is also a chance to hear the words from the book. So we're going to ask Iona and Joe to actually read it aloud from the book. There'll be two pieces, so we'll do one, and then we'll have a wee pause. And if anybody's got any questions at that point, we'll stop. And then if we've got enough time, we'll do the second piece, so that you get the full flavour of the different voices and the different tones and the different kind of ways that these stories are brought to life in this book, because they really are remarkably accessible, and they're easy, and they're all age. They're not just for kids, and they're not just for adults. Like, anybody can get this. And one of the things that I think is great about what Jo does is that it makes you want to write your own stories, or it makes you feel you could, because it's such accessible language, and she brings this place where they feel like real people. It doesn't feel like an abstract thing, a Bible story from thousands of years ago. It feels like it's happening now, and it's real. So I will let them read aloud now, and then we'll get back into a wee bit more stuff with Jo after that. Take it away, Iona.
Okay, thanks, Jane, and thanks, Iona. Well, quite a few of the pieces in this book, by no means all, but quite a few of them are set up as dialogues. They're conversations between two different characters. And so they're all just a way to maybe pay attention to something in a Bible story that we might miss, just something that grabs your curiosity, or that has grabbed my curiosity. So this first piece that Iona and I are going to read, it's based on a part of Exodus chapter 16, where the whole crowd of Israelites have just experienced that dramatic escape from Egypt led by Moses. And they are out in the wilderness, and things are not so easy out there. There's beginning to be a bit of grumbling going on. And so I'm going to be Moses, and Iona is going to be a moaner. And it's called Who's to Blame?
I'm hungry.
Yep,
We're all hungry.
I can see that.
You'll have to do something.
Me? Why me?
Because this is all your fault, that's why.
It isn't.
Yes, it is. You brought us out here.
And no, I didn't.
Yes, you did. You and your grand stupid idea.
It wasn't my idea.
So why did you do it?
I didn't do it. God did it.
But you told us everything would be all right.
No, I didn't. I had no idea what would happen.
But you've wandered around in places like this before.
Yeah, I've been in the desert more than the rest of you.
You knew there would be no food here.
Yep, I knew there's not much to eat in a desert.
So it's your fault that we're all hungry.
I'm hungry too. To do?
You could take us back to Egypt.
Great idea.
Find us some food then.
That's not my job.
Well, whose job is it?
It's God's job. Go complain to God.
What's God gonna do about it?
God's going to feed you.
What makes you say that?
God told me.
God told you he's going to feed us.
Yes.
When?
Tonight.
What about tomorrow?
Yep. He'll feed you tomorrow too.
What about the next day?
Yep. And the day after that.
Is that a promise?
Food is on its way. Promise.
From where?
From heaven.
From heaven? How can you get food from heaven?
Same way as you get rain from heaven. Or so God tells me.
How are you going to do that?
I keep telling you, I'm not going to do anything. God's going to do something.
How can you believe that?
How can you believe we got out of Egypt?
Well, we're here, aren't we?
And some food is about to be here too.
What kind of food?
Some kind of bread, I think, and some kind of meat.
No melons? No cucumbers?
You can always go back to Egypt for some of them.
I didn't really mean the bit about Egypt.
You don't say.
What if there's no bread tonight or meat tonight, tomorrow or the next day?
Don't blame me.
That was great. So I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did. And I think one of the things that I like most is just how accessible that is to kids. But one of the things that I think is interesting is that it doesn't talk down. It's not been made like infantile language. And I think that's one of the other really interesting things about what you do and how you try to not separate out the audiences. So if you want to explain a wee bit to everybody exactly that approach about how you try to make all age really be all age worship.
Thanks for that. That's a really good question, Jane. And I think that I give all credit to the whole of the Spill the Beans team, because we've touched on this and talked about this many times, and about intergenerational worship. What does that really mean, and how does that relate to the telling, these kind of retellings? In fact, just how we present the Bible, how we handle the Bible at all with different ages. And I think, you know, we've kind of treated the Bible sometimes as if it is a children's storybook, you know, and we pull certain stories out of it and make them very child friendly, but there's not a lot there that is very child friendly in some ways. So at different times in the life of Spill the Beans, we've done these retellings in different ways and with a different maybe sort of justification behind them. For a long time, we did separate out and do very much an adult retelling, and then a retelling where we're thinking very much of younger children. At the moment, we're just doing one scripture retelling and trying to think more broadly about all ages. So there's a mix of things in the book. There are some of the ones that are very much for little children. Although I think, you know, whatever kind of age group we might be aiming for, and if we are making any separation, but I think all kinds of stories still have an appeal to all kinds of ages. Even if you're thinking of the little kids, there'll be something in that little kids thing that absolutely is appropriate and appealing to adults, and vice versa.
Yeah. Right, so you want to talk to us now a little bit about the next piece that you and Iona are planning to do, and the background to that one?
Okay, so this is a bit further on in the Old Testament. We're now in the book of 1 Samuel. And at that time, there was a king called King Saul, but he was not finding favor with God. He was falling out of God's favor. And the prophet Samuel is told to go and anoint someone else to be the next king. But of course, this happens while King Saul is still alive. And so Samuel's sent to a family which has a whole crew of brothers in the family, and it turns out that it's the youngest one who is anointed to be the king. And of course, that's David, King David, to be. He's quite young when he's anointed. And the bit in the story that piqued my curiosity was in the knowledge that he had all these older brothers who were not picked, and that the unusual choice of the youngest one. And I thought, well, what if we'd been one of those older brothers? What would we have made of these events of the young kid brother getting anointed by this great prophet? So this is a fictional but feasible, maybe, conversation between the eldest brother and the next eldest. And it's based on 1 Samuel 16, and it's called Voted Out. So again, Iona and I are going to be two of the brothers. It was naming. Yes.
It should have been me.
What are you talking about? It should never have been you. It should have been me, actually.
But you didn't want it to be you, and it wasn't you. So it should have been me.
Why did you want it to be you? It's a lucky escape, bro. That wee Egypt can have it. I'm glad it's him and no me. And no you either.
But I wanted it. He'll be a right pain in the neck now. He'll think he's better than us. If you didn't get it, I'm next in line. But no, all 7 of us get passed over right for that wee naff.
Away and complain to Sam then. He's your man. It's all his doing. But I don't see why you're so bothered. Aye, thank God it wasn't me.
How come you didn't want it anyway? How come you think it's a lucky escape? That was your big chance for glory, and you're glad to miss out. How come?
Oh, work it out, will you? The king is still alive and well, though rumoured to be going a bit nuts. And good old Prophet Sam anoints someone else to be the next king. Well, you bet I'm glad it's no me with a sign on my head saying king's rival. Just wait till word gets out. I don't think our wee bro will last a minute. He'll be hunted for crying out loud.
But prophets aren't in the business of putting people's lives in danger.
Aye, right. What was the first thing Pharaoh did when Moses went asking for liberation?
Okay. He doubled the workload of the slaves for a bit, but it was all right after that.
All right, after that. Sure, everything was just dandy, save for a few plagues, a near drowning, near death by thirst, and near mutiny against the great prophet for putting people's lives in near constant danger.
Did you really think that wee Davy'll be assassinated or something?
I don't know. What happens now? Who can say?
So much for being the Lord's anointed. No much of a pleasure, really.
Nope.
But does it not put Sam on a dodgy footing too, if the king finds out what he's done?
Mm-hmm. Great perks and privileges being a prophet. Bet you wish that was you too.
Should your dad not have just stopped all this happening then?
Ah, and you'd like to do a better job being eldest son or father as well.
I'm just thinking what all this could do to our family. He's still our kid brother.
Aye. And he's been anointed by a prophet and chosen by God to be king. You want to argue with that?
But I don't get it.
Neither do I. But what I do get is this. You and I are still to be what we've always been. Shepherds, soldiers, sons, brothers. That's quite enough to live up to.
Do you think wee Davy actually wishes it wasn't him?
Maybe we all live up to what's asked of us. And he's not that wee anymore. Make him less of an Egypt.
Our Davy for king!
Gun yourself, Wigan! Woo!
Round of applause. Right, so does anyone have any questions for Joe? You can either speak them, put them in the chat, whatever's comfortable.
Well, just to say, I found it so refreshing just to listen to the two of you, bouncing off each other. And I can see ample opportunity for this kind of style of worship. Because very shortly we're moving from our local church, which is Fontibit, into our new community hub, and I'm involved quite strongly there. So the idea is that we will be doing Sunday worship in a less formal setting, and the kind of stuff that you've come up with is ideal, because it will not just be direct to the young people, it will be direct to the adults as well. So thanks very much. Great to see you both.
Thanks very much, Alan, and all the best with those next steps for where you are, and thanks for your kind words. That's really encouraging.
Well, what's the word they're using in the church style? Mission. Well, my mission is to get us moved to the hub, and then I can say mission accomplished.
All the best.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat. First one from Margaret. In a service, would you use these stories in place of the Bible passage or as well as?
Mostly as well as, and thanks for that question. Yeah, in each edition of Spill the Beans, where these were first appeared, there's usually a kind of line of instruction or line of suggestion as to how they could be used. Some really belong before the Bible reading, some belong in an immediate follow-up or later in the service. But yes, I would normally, by and large, be both and. Yeah.
Wonderful. And one other question from Sue. Can you do this with any bits, even long soliloquies?
Yes, and I have done. Absolutely. I think anything in scripture, yeah, just to find those little moments in it that piques your curiosity and kind of stay with it. I'd like to think of it as these retellings are just a way of sometimes playing with scripture, that kind of sense of coming up with something that's fictional but feasible as a kind of, but also just helps us to stay in it a bit more, just to stay with it, and maybe to consider what's going on around the edges. Who are the characters that are there that are maybe not saying anything, and what might their perspective be? Or so yes, it can be done with soliloquies, and there are more reflective kind of pieces like that, just in one voice. Yeah, absolutely. Anything is game. Play with it. Go with it.
There you go, Sue. Any more questions? I've not got any from the chat, but anyone wishing to speak?
Well, if anyone's not wishing to speak, I'm going to throw out a question to you now. This is what we like to do when we have an author Zoom event, is we like to have a wee giveaway moment. We like to give away a free book. We give away a free copy of Joe's book, or if you've already got a copy of Joe's book, you can get a second copy, or you can choose another book from Wild Goose Publications, but you have to answer our quiz. So our question tonight is this, and you can put it in the chat in the side, is Joe joined the Wild Goose Resource Group in 2009, but you have to guess which date in 2009, and the person that gets closest to the actual day and month that she joined gets their free book. So guess your dates, put them in the chat, and let's see who gets their free book tonight. So while you're all thinking dates, me and Joe keep chatting. So Joe, I know we all miss Graham very much from Wild Goose Resource Group, and I know John's retired officially out of his day-to-day things, but I believe you and him might have something in the works too for future work, or
Yeah,
or
well,
we can't talk about that yet.
well, we have an idea brewing for probably about 3 years now. And it is to co-write a book very much about the best, if you like, the best gems of wisdom and very practical kind of advice, if we could call it that, or practical pointers about creative and participative worship, and what are the kinds of things that we even mean by that. I mean, some of you will have come across our work and have met us in workshop and conference or on Iona and kind of seen it all in action, but some others haven't. So we thought it's about time, especially with John having retired, while he's still kind of fresh enough, and get that wisdom out of his brain and onto the page, and just a kind of gathering of some of the best stuff that we feel has kind of sifted down through all our experience, and what would be our best offerings. It can say if people are just trying to bring different ideas to our times of worship, you know, how do you go about that? What are some real concrete practical guidelines about setting things up and getting it right and making it the most beautiful and the best kind of offering to God that we can? Like I say, in all these ways that we've talked about earlier about, you know, bringing in more the visuals or the symbolism and you know, symbolic action and different ways of responding and different ways of, I guess, just in the recognition that, you know, in Scotland, especially in the Church of Scotland, we very much have a preaching centered form. That's the form we know best. But it's just to say, what are other ways that we can engage with the Bible? What are the other ways we can engage with what's happening in the world? Where, you know, preaching is one way of doing it, and it's certainly a very good way. But there's lots of other ways that we can encounter God together and engage with the world and scripture together in our times of worship. So we are hoping to finally get down and get all these things kind of trawling through past resources and out of our own brains before we lose it, and do some kind of book that just is again just trying to be that resource, live up to our name, you know, be a resource to people that really want to delve into this stuff and try things out, and just to give that confidence and that encouragement, but some real guidelines and practical pointers and worked examples from what we've done, and including what we've done wrong, and and learning from mistakes as well, and you know what doesn't work, but what does. So that's the idea that's on the brew.
Well, I hope we get to publish it. That's all I'm saying. Don't you be running off with a fancy publisher. But that's an interesting thing about what does, you know, sometimes we do learn as much from our mistakes. Have you ever written a piece that people have just utterly rejected and said this, or do you get pushback from more conservative people about you shouldn't be using this colloquial language, or it's like it's too Scottish, or it's too whatever, or it's mostly a positive response you get?
Well, in the sense of the stuff or spill the beans, I mean, we get, when as much as we get feedback, it's not usually as specific as to this one story or to this one prayer. It's usually a broad feedback on the entire resource and the fact that we're doing it at all, and that we're making this offering so that people can do their worship planning and shaping without starting from a blank page. It's a very pick and mix approach deliberately. That's why we called it Spill the Beans, that kind of, you know, pick what's useful to you. So I would have to say that in as much as I've had any specific feedback, which is actually very rare, it has broadly speaking been of the positive kind, which is very nice. I've never had anyone say, oh, what you know, really being derogatory about it. Although people might feel that way, in which case they'll just not use it and it'll not be their thing, and that's okay as well.
Yeah. And so can you also tell us a wee bit about what you've got planned for next week? Because you've got a week coming up right on Iona with Jane.
That's right. That's right.
Carol.
It's the Wild Goose Resource Group, our main annual programme week on Iona. So we'll be heading up on Saturday. So once again, my co-leaders will be Carol Marples of the Soul March Trust and Jane Bentley in almost her last gig before she actually becomes my official new colleague. But she's still doing this week on a freelance basis. So I've been absolutely delighted to have Jane and Carol over the last few years as my co-leaders on the week. This is the 4th time we'll have done this week as a trio of leaders. So this week, this year, our theme is bones and groans, because we're close to Pentecost, obviously, in that sense of that great story of Ezekiel and the dry bones, and the sense of, you know, the Spirit coming and can these bones live, and the story of Pentecost itself, and the imagery in the New Testament about the Spirit, you know, when we can't pray, giving us groans and giving us what words cannot express. So it's very much that sense of worship beyond words, you know. So we'll be playing around. We'll be doing lots of scripture play again, which I love, playing around with passages and moving into them, you know, literally bringing them alive in our own bodies, and walking things out and acting things out, and looking at what's really going on in these stories when it comes off the page, and how can we express that in worship. That's not just words, that's more than the words, it's beyond the words, that's without the words. So yeah, that's where we're at for next week.
Right. That was harder for me to think of as a book, but you know, I might find a way. All right, let's see who is going to get our free book tonight. Have you been keeping an eye on that, Iona? Anybody?
I have. I'm just double checking answers, but I did wonder. Norma, did you have a question as well, or were you just?
No.
Nope, that's fine. There was a comment as well in chat from Alan again. You will remember earlier days, Joe, when you and John did Wild Goose footprint sketches. So you can reflect on that while I double check the winner.
That was before my time, but yes, you're right, Alan. Absolutely. Yep. The goose prints.
And do you have a favorite Bible story? Is there one that, like, as a kid, for example, that you were like, you loved it when that story came up? Or again, is it just too hard to choose? There's too many good ones.
Well, my favorite ones don't come from childhood days. I'm not sure that I had a favorite when I was a child, but one of my favorites is, well, one story in one whole book. My favorite story that intrigues me so much is Jacob wrestling with whoever it was in the night, and yeah, I've written about that actually. It's a Spill the Beans piece, but that just fascinates me, that story of that fight in the night. But as a whole book, I am a total lover of Ecclesiastes. And you know, when people say who would be your favorite dinner party guest, you know, alive or dead, bring me that philosopher, bring me that ancient philosopher. Absolutely incredible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
We've got lots of guesses in. Thank you very much, everyone. No one is in the right month exactly, but despite that, we've got a first and second place are only separated by 6 days difference, which, considering there's 365 in a year, is pretty close. But I can confirm that the person who was closest to your actual date of joining, October the 12th, was your fellow deacon, Dot Getliff. Well done, Dot. So I will email you, Dot, and check if you want Joe's book, or if you've already got it and you want a different book. I'll give you a wee email.
Yes, that would be really kind. Thank you. Oh, it wasn't rigged, honestly.
It wasn't.
It wasn't rigged. Joe and I have done a couple of New Testament things. I remember, Joe, the Pharisee and the publican, we did it as 2 guys, and you had this baseball cap round the wrong way. You were the chancellor.
That's right.
And I was the snobby one. not in character at all.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Does anyone have any other questions that they want, or would anybody like to hear anything else from the book? Although we've not really prepared anything else from the book, but if there was one,
I can always do one.
Yeah, if would people like to hear one other little piece before we wrap things up for the night? Yes.
I can see the silent cries of encore, encore.
Encore, indeed. Even if it's just like a piece that you want, not necessarily a dialogue, but a piece that you would like to read to us, Joe.
Okay, well, I'd quite like to do the one just for fun. I'd quite like to do the one it's based on Judges 16, and it's based on Samson and Delilah.
Oh,
And so I hope you know well enough the story of Samson and Delilah. So Samson, who falls in love with Delilah, and she is kind of prevailed upon to try and find out what's the secret to his great strength, which is of course in his long hair. But they have a bit of a runaround before well, the poem kind of tells the tale, and eventually he kind of almost walks into his own downfall. But then, as we know later, as he's in captivity, his hair grows again, and nobody's kind of thinking about that. So then literally he brings the house down at the end of the day. So this is just a piece playing with that story of Samson and Delilah, and it's called Playing Games. Delilah, Delilah, look at this silver, all yours if you tease out the truth from your lover. What is his strength's secret? How well you'll be paid. Persuade him with whatever game can be played. Delilah, Delilah, here's what to try. 7 fresh bowstrings that have not gone dry. Stay him, subdue him, how well you'll be paid. But the bowstrings don't bind him. What a game he has played. Delilah, Delilah, here's what will subdue. Tie him with ropes that have never been used. Hold him, control him, how well you'll be paid. But the ropes don't restrain him. What a game he has played. Delilah, Delilah, here's what to do. Weave the locks of his hair and pin to the loom. Quell him, suppress him, how well you'll be paid. But the loom doesn't lick him. What a game he has played. Delilah, Delilah, here's what he said. Take a razor and shave every hair from his head. Crush him, constrain him, how well you'll be paid. By the razor he's revealed his foolish game played. Samson, oh Samson, what have you done? Lies upon lies, and then why? Your strength gone. Outwitting, defeating, how well they'll be paid when the final act of your game is played.
excellent. That was great, Joe. That was a really, I loved that one. I was like right there in the drama. That was the perfect, another perfect example of that, of just making a story feel real and contemporary, something that you can relate to now. I love that about your writing, that you bring things to the moment and you bring things alive. One of the things you said earlier when you were talking about how you get inside a story, and you used the expression staying and playing, about just staying inside it long enough till there's something to play with. And I love that idea. I think it's something that we can all use in all aspects of our life, is just staying with any topic a little bit longer and finding the place to, you know, find that little spark that just makes it different and makes it human. All right, well, I think I'm not going to keep everyone too much longer. If everybody's asked a question. Oh, we have one. Is that a question? No? Anybody else want to add anything else before we say an enormous thank you to Joe and to Iona?
I can see one waving hand there.
Oh,
from Lorna again.
Yep. No.
The Gaelic word shenachie is a storyteller, and George MacLeod was one. He keeps telling the same story and it changes as it goes along, but it doesn't matter because the essence is in this, is in the story that gets right there. So I call myself sometimes a Shenachie because I tell people about things that are happening. Totally agree with everything Joe says about stories. God has given us a book full of stories. That was an old-fashioned song I used to sing in the Sunday school.
Thanks, Lorna.
Stories are, I do think they're just such an important way for us to, well, it's how we keep people alive. It's how we keep anything alive is stories, right? Word of mouth. So if you haven't read the book, read the book. And I'm really excited that there's another one still to come in the series. And I hope that you and John get your book together. And I'm sorry I won't be on Iona to experience the whole other method of storytelling through, you know, bodies and music and all of that. But thank you so much, Joe. That was just great. I really enjoyed it. I love stories. It's why I do what I do. It's why I do this job. And when we get a book out that makes me excited, it's just a lovely thing. So I hope it was a lovely thing for all of you as well. And thank you all for coming. Thank you all for supporting us.
Can I just say before you sign off, Joe, will you give me a signed copy, please, from the author? You sign
Sure.
my copy. Thank
Sure.
you.
Right.
Thanks for asking.
And you're all my witness that she has to go and look for that poem. We need to hear that peace poem, right?
Yeah, yes.
I want to see that.
Well, thanks, Jane. It's been great to be with everyone, and thank you so much. Thanks, Iona.
Yeah,
No problem. Lovely to see you all. Thank you all for coming.
right. Stay tuned to our social media for the next one.